Hi everyone, welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your cat VRC preparation. In this session, we'll be continuing with the RC that we had started with in the first part of the video. This RC was asked in your cat exam in the year 2019 in the second slot. I've titled the RC as Capital Cities Disgorging Bureaucrats, 517 words, 5 questions. Again, quite standard for your cat RC. So yeah, so in this session we'll be discussing the questions. We've already discussed the passage in detail, in quite some detail in the first part. For those of you who have not watched that, you can check the link of the first part in the description of the video and go and watch that. Okay, so let's start. Okay guys, so coming to the questions, let's start with the first one. The stem says, according to the passage, colonial powers located their capitals. You're supposed to complete the sentence. Okay, so let's go through the options one by one. Colonial powers located their capitals based on political expediency. No, the discussion about colonial powers locating their capitals has been carried out in the very first few lines of the paragraph, and the author hasn't mentioned political expediency anywhere. Okay, so something that you can very easily eliminate here. Option A. Coming to the second one, to promote their trading interests. To promote their trading interests. Colonial powers located their capitals to promote their trading interests. Yes, that's in fact what he has said, right? If you read this part, the point of reference, in the post-colonial fervor of the 20th century, coastal capitals picked by trade-focused empires. So the empires, the colonial powers had picked up coastal capitals because they were trade-focused, right? So we can say that yes, they had located their capitals to promote their trading interests. So that's quite correct. Uh, so you can mark this with a capital S as a strong case of strong selection. Coming to the next option, where they had the densest populations. Colonial powers located their capitals where they had the densest populations. Error of inclusion not mentioned anywhere in the passage. This is a typical case of EOI, error of inclusion, option C, right? In fact, even political expediency is also not mentioned anywhere. So even A is a case of EOI. Coming to the next one, to showcase their power and prestige. Again, not hasn't been mentioned anywhere, right? Power, prestige, or densest populations, or political expediency, none of these ideas have been mentioned anywhere in the passage. So A, C, and D, all three are cases of errors of inclusion. Your correct answer will thus here be option B. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so let's start with question number 2. The stem says, according to the author, relocating government agencies has not always been a success for all of the following reasons except. So we again have a triple TF scenario, right? Triple TF scenario is when three of the options will be correct in the light of the passage and the question stem, and one of them will not be correct, and the one that is not correct will be your answer. Okay, it's as I always I'll advise you guys to always simplify these kind of questions. See, this is not really such a big deal. I know you guys can deal with this slight complexity even without having to simplify. I understand that, but then what happens is in a pressured situation, you might just end up making some silly mistake, and you might just because you're kind of in a hurry and you're kind of a little tensed in those, stressed sometimes, maybe while attempting the mock or giving your exam. So it's always better to err on this side, err on the side of caution, and then take those extra 5 seconds to just simplify the stem and then go on with assessing the options. Okay, so with respect to so relocating government agencies have not the idea of relocating government agencies has not always been a success for all of the following reasons. So three of them will be the reasons that the author has mentioned why the relocation might not have been a success, and one of them will not be a reason, right? The one that is not the reason that which the author has, like, which is the reason which the author has not mentioned, it will be your answer. Okay, so let's assess the options one by one. First one says a rise in pollution levels and congestion in the new locations. No, the author has definitely not talked about pollution levels, and even in the passage. So, and also congestion, he has talked about congestion, but with that the congestion has been more with respect to the capital cities, which are like he says that three specific aims to improve the lives of both the civil servants and those living in clogged capitals. So he does mention the capitals. He has regarded the capitals to be slightly clogged or congested at one point, but that does not relate to the new locations, right? So this is definitely incorrect. This is definitely false and makes a very strong case for selection. So I'll mark this as a capital S scenario. Coming to option B, the difficulty of attracting talented, well-skilled people in more remote areas. The difficulty of attracting talented, more well-skilled people in more remote areas. Yes, the author has talked about it here. In fact, the point of reference is here. The dilemma is obvious. If you pick small, poor towns, like the more remote areas and areas of high employment to get new jobs, then it is hard to attract the most qualified workers there, right? So yes, this is definitely called for. This is something that the author has mentioned, and hence it is true, and hence can also be very easily eliminated. Next, option C, increased revenues of corruption away from the capital city. Yes, the author talks about this towards the very end of the paragraph. A study in America found that the state government corruption is worse when the state capital is isolated. Journalists who tend to live in the bigger cities have become less watchful of those in power, and hence there's a decrease in accountability, which leads to corruption. So again, a call for scenario like this is definitely true in the context of the passage in terms when it comes to relocating the problem cited by the author relating to relocating of government agencies, right? So this is true, can be eliminated. Option D, high staff losses as people may not be prepared to move to smaller towns. Yes, the author has mentioned this. In this paragraph, he says that, but the swapping of capitals for somewhere smaller is not always agreeable. Attrition rates can be high. So that attrition rates relate to the idea that when employees, in this case government employees, when they leave the government agencies or the organization, government bodies here, right? So this is also true. So you can mark this as well as true, and all three of these can be thus very easily eliminated. Okay, so your answer will obviously be option A. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, so let's start with question number 3. The stem says the long pedigree of the aim to shift civil servants to improve their living standards implies that this move, again, you have to complete the sentence. See, guys, it has been taken from this point of reference where the author says the first aim improving living conditions has a long pedigree. Pedigree is the term that stands for ancestry or lineage, right? So when you say, by the way, it's for the same reason. The branding of the pet food pedigree is for the same reason, right? That means it refers to the pet being belonging to a ancestral or a high class, if I may use that expression, breed, a different, a very old breed, right? A kind of a pure bred kind of thing. So pedigree, that's what pedigree means. Pedigree means it has a long history, it has a long ancestry behind it. So in this case, the author meant to say that this first aim has a long pedigree. That means this is something that has been tried, that the people have been trying for a long time now, right? It has a history behind it. Okay, now in the backdrop of this, let's assess the options. First one says implies that this move has become common practice in several countries worldwide. The author, okay, so maybe the common practice part is by a huge stretch of imagination, you can probably still infer that, but the later part, in several countries worldwide, like you'll have to further even more stretch your imagination to allow this to be something that can be implied from this. So basically, no, it cannot be implied. We cannot like combine the first set of words here around the world and infer several countries worldwide, and then in like just assume on our part that it has become a must have become a common practice because it is something that has been going on for such a long time. It must have become a common practice. Requires assumptions on multiple accounts, something that is totally unwarranted, and we'll have to eliminate this option. Coming to the next one, is supported. This will be by the way, option A will be a case of error of assumption. This will be a case of EOA. So yeah. Uh, Coming to option B, is supported by politicians and ruling elites. So the long pedigree of the aim to shift civil servants to improve their living standards implies that this move is supported by politicians and the ruling elites. No, long pedigree or doesn't have anything to do with obtaining supports from elites or politicians. No, so you can eliminate this as well. Takes a long time to achieve its intended outcomes. No, even not the correct meaning. So this I do agree that in this case, at least for this question, the vocabulary, having a slight know-how of this vocabulary would have definitely given a person, a learner, an upper hand here. So it takes a long time to achieve its intended outcome. No, that's not what the author has. And guys, another point that I'd like to note here is that even if you did not know the meaning of this expression very clearly, we still could have at least taken a hint from the context, right? Just look at what the author talks about in the next sentence. In the very next sentence, he talks about like after the Second World War, Britain went on to do this, and then he says that he says the direction takes a negative turn in terms of okay, it was anyways, it's not something that is always helpful, right? Doing this. So he's talked about history here. He just talked about that a case where it has already been done, right? So option A has become common practice in several countries, does not match with the latest sentence. Option B, supported by politicians and ruling elites, he has not talked about that in the latest sentence. The next sentence, takes a long time to achieve its intended outcomes, has also not been talked about. So even if you did not know the vocabulary here, so people who knew this, who knew the vocabulary, obviously will have an upper hand. But even if you did not know it, that you still could have answered it just by looking at the context here, right? So is not a new idea and has been tried in the past. Yes, that's exactly what the author meant to say here. Yes, and then that's also implied in the next line, right? Yes, it has been tried in the past. The Britishers tried it in the past. So yeah, option uh, D will be the correct answer and will be selected by a capital S strong selection. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, let's start with question 4. STEM says people who support decentralizing central government functions are least likely to cite which of the following reasons for their view. Okay, application question. Now let's simplify the STEM simply. Okay, so we are talking about people who support decentralization one, and we want to select the option as an answer which they are least likely to cite. Okay, okay, let's first talk about what they are most likely to cite. So if these are people who support decentralization, then they are most likely to cite views which also support decentralization. So most likely to cite views that support decentralization, and hence least likely to cite views which don't support decentralization, right? That means the option that we are looking for, which will be our answer, will be the one that does not support decentralization. Okay, okay, or you can say that which weakens the point for decentralization. Okay, and there's a difference between does not support and weakens. Does not support can also be a neutral option which is irrelevant, and weaken has to be something that does support. Okay, so let's start with the options. First one says it could weaken the nexus. Decentralization could weaken the nexus between bureaucrats and the media and the capital. This was a point that was made against decentralization, right? Because the author towards the end said that many people contend that decentralization can lead to corruption because it will like kind of weaken the nexus between the bureaucrats and the media, like the journalists who tend to live in the bigger cities, they won't follow these people in power who now don't live in the capital cities, right? That's what he has said here. So this actually weakens, and if this is a point that weakens the idea of decentralization, in that case the people who support decentralization are not likely to cite this, right? So this is in fact a very good candidate for our answer here. Okay, so we'll mark this as a capital S and move on to the next option. More independence could be enjoyed by regulatory bodies located away from political centers. The point of reference is here. The autonomous regulators perform best far from the pressure. So this is a point that is made for decentralization, and hence these people are actually likely to cite this, right? So they are not least likely; they are actually likely to cite this, and hence this can be eliminated very easily. Next, policymakers may benefit from fresh thinking in a new environment. Policymakers may benefit from fresh thinking in a New environment, yes, this also has been cited here for as a positive benefit that might be derived out of decentralization. The author uses this expression, right? Wongs in the sticks will be inspired by new ideas. So wongs is a term that has been used for your like so-called boring and hardworking and not so creative bureaucrats, which if they are put in the countryside in the environment, right? If they are put in a new environment, they might just benefit from fresh thinking, from some creativity. So yes, this is something that they are likely to cite and hence can be eliminated. Next, it reduces expenses as infrastructure costs and salaries are lower in smaller cities. Yes, even this has been cited here as the second aim, right, for the function of decentralizing central government agencies. So the author says that the second reason uh, to pack bureaucrats off is to save money. Office spaces cost far more in capitals, that means less in the remote areas. So yes, infrastructure costs, and and can often recruit better workers on lower salaries. So yes, salaries are also lower. So totally called for. This is something that they are again likely to cite. They are not least likely to cite this. They are actually more likely to cite this. So it can also be eliminated. Hence your correct answer here will be option A. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 5. The stem says the dilemma mentioned in the passage refers to keeping government agencies in the largest. The dilemma has been talked about in the at this point of reference. Okay, the author says the dilemma is obvious. If you pick small poor towns and areas of high unemployment get new jobs, but it is hard to attract the most qualified workers. So if you go for the more remote towns, you'll be able to help them develop by providing jobs there and uplift those areas, but you won't get qualified workers. And if you opt for larger cities with infrastructure and better qualified residents, that those are the advantages for larger cities. And but then the country's most deprived areas will see little benefits. This was a dilemma. Let's look at the options now. Keeping government agencies in the largest city with good infrastructure, or moving them to a remote area with few amenities. See guys, the question center has played around here with a few words here. Instead of larger cities, this option says largest city, which is not the same. Largest city might actually, in fact, could be a reference to the capital city, right? Or it at least goes away from, it distorts the idea. It goes away from what the author has said. Author has a reference has been to tier 2 cities, which are larger and more developed than the remote areas, but at the same time not your capital cities, right? So that's clearly a distortion. That's on one account why this option is wrong. First account, because of which this option is wrong. Second, this, see guys, it the dilemma is when you either compare the positives of 2 points or the negatives of 2 points. If you take the positive of this and the negative of this, then there is no dilemma. Dilemma arises because you find the choice to be difficult. And in this option, if you look at this option, it says keeping government agency in the largest city with good infrastructure or moving them to a remote area with few amenities. Where's the dilemma? Like in one case, for the first category, it talks about the positive, and for the second, it talks about the negative. There's no dilemma there, right? Either you talk about the positives in both the cases, or you talk about the negatives in both the cases, right? Or you talk about everything, like you talk about positives and negatives of this, and positives and negatives of this. In that case, it can still be a dilemma. But if you talk about like, it cannot be polarized, right? You talk about the positive here and the negative here, then it's not a dilemma. That's the second problem with this option, and hence enough reason to eliminate this. Option 1 can be eliminated quite easily. Option B, relocating government agencies to boost growth in remote areas. So the positive for the remote areas, selecting the remote areas with poor amenities. Negative is with respect to the remote areas, growth is the positive and poor amenities is the negative. Or to relatively larger cities with good amenities. Yes, so he talks about the positive here. He's talked about the positive here. The negative as well has been mentioned here. So that's okay. But and moreover, there is no distortion with respect to the with the adjective here, larger. It is not largest. So this still makes sense. The positive of one have been compared to the positive of the other. Although the negative also has been mentioned of the first one, but that's okay. But that still is enough to create the dilemma. And moreover, there is no other distortion, so this can be a good candidate for an answer. Okay, we'll mark this as a capital S and move on to the next one. Encouraging private enterprises to relocate to smaller towns, or not incentivizing them in order to keep government costs in those towns low. Discussion about incentivizing private enterprises or not incentivizing them has not been carried out anywhere in the passage. The author does talk about private enterprises. He says that where government jobs go, private ones also follow. But he doesn't say anything about incentivizing them or not incentivizing them, right? So this is clearly not, and then moreover, it's nowhere related to the relates to the dilemma point of reference of the passage. So again, cannot be the answer. Can be eliminated with a capital D. Option D, concentrating on decongesting large cities or focusing on boosting employment in relatively larger cities. Concentrating on decongesting large cities. No, maybe decongesting large cities seems to be a concern for the author, because he says here that uh, may improve the lives of both civil servants and those living in clogged capitals. So maybe that is a concern, but that is not what forms part of the dilemma. Like in any case, whether you select the remote cities for relocation or whether you select the tier 2 cities for relocation, you are anyways decongesting the capital cities. So that is anyways happening. So there's no dilemma there again. Or focusing on boosting employment relatively large, and moreover, boosting employment was not pertaining to the relatively larger cities. It was more pertaining to your remote areas, okay, not the larger cities. So again, can be eliminated with a capital E. Okay, so yeah, so your correct answer is obviously option B. Okay, so with this we are done with the questions. Let's move on to the vocabulary part. Okay, guys, so coming to the vocabulary part. Now, see, the way we go about the vocabulary so far as the anthology sessions are concerned, I'm not going to read out uh, the meaning and discuss the meaning of each and every word which has been marked here. Because we'll have a separate course which will be dedicated to vocabulary building, a series of separate courses, in fact. So and to keep these sessions short, what I'm going to do is just going to list, mark the words which I figured that some of you may have found challenging, and then provide the contextual meaning of those words. Yeah. Okay. So yes, that's how we're going to go about vocabulary. What you can do is you can simply pause the video here, go through the word in its context, as part of the sentence where it occurs, read that, and then read the meaning of the sentence. That's as simple as that, right? So you can do that, and I'm going to move on to the next part. All right, guys. So let's start with the analysis and reading section of the video. So starting with the analysis, RC analysis first. The genre for this RC is here. Now, for those of you who might have faced difficulty in the topic of the RC with respect to the topic of the RC, the ideas discussed, or maybe even the terminology of the RC, you would definitely benefit from reading more content from the same genre. The readability of the RC, or not the RC, the passage. Okay, the readability is just of the passage, right? So it basically shows you how difficult or easy the passage was to comprehend. It has been scored out of 10. It is based on a variant of Flesch-Kincaid grade level scale, that is the most ubiquitously used readability scale across various types of text. So it is quite reliable. So it is based on the variant of this. So from this, you can gauge how readable or easy or difficult to comprehend the passage was. Next, the length of the passage is also provided here. I would suggest that the parameter that you should use for understanding or for checking the length of passage should not be just the number of words, but rather number of words that you are required to read for answering for every question that you need to answer, right? So and which for cat RCs is usually around 100 words per question, plus minus 15 to 20% sometimes. So you can take this as a benchmark and compare how lengthy or not so lengthy this passage was, and accordingly incorporate steps in your strategy to address if you faced issues in terms of because of the passage length. Coming to the last part of the analysis, ideal time to solve the RC is the total time is listed here. Time required that you should have taken up while reading the passage should have been less than this, and for questions should have been less than this, and this is the overall total, right? So yeah, so that's the idle time. Finally, suggested readings.
Okay, guys,
For
coming to the
this,
analysis and
based
readings
on
part,
this RC, based on this
the first
genre, and
parameter that we'll
based on this
discuss is the
RC,
genre.
a
Now,
couple of
the
articles
genre
have
is
been picked
basically
up,
the
which
source,
the title and the author and
the
the
domain of
platforms
the
where they are
source from
available
where the passage has been taken. It
have been
can be
provided here, and the links
psychology,
to these
economics,
articles are provided
management, science,
in the description
technology,
of the
or
this YouTube video.
politics, governance, culture,
Okay, so you
social
can
sciences, history,
check
many
out
of
those
them. So,
articles and
and
read those, go
why
through
is it
those to
relevant?
get
Why is
some
it
more
relevant to
exposure
for me to
in
tell
this
you what
genre
genre
and
the
in this
passage was
topic.
from?
Okay,
Because, guys, there
so
is
that
utility.
completes the reading and
There's
analysis
some
part of
utility here
this
because let's
section of
suppose you
this
faced
session.
some difficulty while reading this particular passage in terms of the terminology or in terms of the ideas that were discussed here. It will definitely benefit you if you can at least read 2 to 3 to 4 articles from this particular genre. That will increase your familiarity, at least to some extent. Especially if you found it really difficult, you should definitely read at least a couple of or 2 or 3 articles from the genre. Okay, if you found it easy, that's all right. But if you found it difficult, that means there is something really for you to gain there. Okay, you really need to gain some familiarity in that genre. All right, that's the first parameter. Second parameter, readability. Readability is with respect to the passage, not the RC. When I say RC, I am talking about the passage as well as the questions. When I say passage, we're just talking about the passage. Readability score, which is mentioned here, it is about this. It scores the passage. It basically tells you how easy or difficult was the passage to comprehend. And the way it can help you is if you figure that for a particular genre, uh, if you figure that generally your understanding or your scores, your accuracy goes really low whenever the readability of the passage is quite high, you can definitely benefit from exposing yourself to material that is more dense, that is more difficult to understand, that has a higher level of readability, that has higher score of readability, right? So yeah, so that's one way in which you can factor in this insight, this takeaway. Next, length of the passage. The length of the passage, as I always say, should always be seen in terms of not just words, but rather words per question. The number of words you're required to read to answer one question of the passage. For CAT, that is usually around 100 words per question. Again, if you once again, if you let's suppose you find your accuracy to be going down when you encounter passages which are lengthy, in that case you might want to get more practice with respect with the lengthy passages, right, which offer less questions per word, or for which you have to read where you have to read more number of words per question. So yeah, that's passage length. Idle time, yes, idle time would be so I've also mentioned the idle time to read the passage here. This is the maximum amount of time that you should take. If it is less than this, that's good, as so far as it doesn't hamper your comprehension. And the idle time for maximum amount of time that you should take for solving the questions here, right? This is the total time for total idle time for solving the passage. Uh, and again, this is with respect to the time that you'd be expected to solve this in your exam conditions on the D-Day, right? When you're practicing, it makes sense to initially when you're just starting your preparation, it makes sense to go gradually. Don't try to speed things up there because speed always follows accuracy. It's never the other way around. Accuracy never follows speed. Speed follows accuracy. Once your accuracy goes really up, once you start getting more confident, that's when you can increase your speed. Okay. All right. Next, so what I've also done here is with every passage, I'm going to provide you a couple of articles, and preferably by the same author, at least, or if not, at least in the same genre, right? So which will give you some familiarity in terms of if you face difficulty again, as I said, in the genre of reading, you can definitely go and check out these articles. The link for these articles have been provided in the provided in the description of the video, so you can check that out. Okay. Yeah, so that's about the analysis and reading part. Okay, now for those of you who are watching, who might be watching one of these videos for the first time, I'll briefly explain to you the structure of these sessions of this course. Okay, so now guys, every single session caters to one RC, one reading comprehension, and is in turn split into 2 parts. The first part of the session is where I explain to you the passage of the RC in detail, and the second part of the session is where I take you through the questions of the RC. Okay, and yeah, so and 40 such sessions make up a course. 40 of these sessions make up a course which is
titled as an anthology of RCs, which is directed towards your reading comprehension preparation for the CAT. All right. The current video that you're watching is the second part of this session, which caters to this particular RC. Okay, guys, with this, we are done with the third RC of the third genre, capital and bureaucrats, capital cities and bureaucrats. And well, for those of you who have not seen or watched the earlier sessions and attempted the earlier RCs, you can do so by going to the playlist of the channel, and where you can go one by one. You can go through each of the videos. The link to attempt the passages is also given in the description of the video, so you can check that and solve them all. Uh, and yeah, that's about it. In the next video we'll take up the fourth RC of this genre. Okay. Okay, guys, so with this, we have come to the conclusion of the session. Now, for those of you who have not watched the first part of this particular RC, this particular session, you can click here on this card and it will take you on this video and it will take you to the first part where you can go through the passage explainer to understand the passage in detail. And for those of you who want to watch the intro video of the course, you can click on this card here. It will take you to the intro video of the course. And for those and others again, and definitely if you like the session, do share it with others who might find it helpful and useful, and definitely do subscribe to the channel Slugger's Blue for your CAT VRZ preparation. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.